name is Katie Hedrick. I'm Dylan's wife, for those of you who don't know me. Usually I'm in the background with all the kids while he's up here talking, so this is a little bit of a role reversal, but we are so grateful to all of you for coming today. It's a big endeavor to run for mayor, especially this year when so many are running. And so it means a lot to us that you're all here to support us today. I'm a teacher. I teach math at SMU, and I'm used to starting class by saying, here's what we're going to do today. So here's the agenda for today. A few people are going to come up and say a few words, and then Dylan's going to give a wonderful speech that he has worked really hard on. And then there's going to be a little Q&A at the end for any questions you have for him. And then time for mingling. There's some great food in the back, some posters up front for you to take a look at. And time for you to also ask him questions one-on-one if you're more comfortable doing it that way. So the first speaker for today is myself. Dylan asked me to say a few words on his behalf, and I thought maybe the best thing I could talk about is give you some insight into our journey to this point. When I've told my friends and my colleagues at work who don't know Dylan very well that he's running for mayor, I've gotten this kind of weird look on their face and a hesitation, like they're choosing their words carefully, and they say, how do you feel about this? Like, I'm just going to say it's so crazy. And I'm usually pretty disappointing to them because I don't think it's crazy. To me, it's just the natural next step. But if I go back to 10 years ago, if he would have told me back then that he wants to be mayor someday, I would have said that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, because there's been such a journey over the last 10 years. So that's what I'd like to tell you a little bit about today. So 10 years ago, we were living in Baltimore. We were moving around every year or two in little apartments, saving up money for a house, paying off student loans. We had our first baby in Baltimore. And Dylan didn't really show any interest in politics. He didn't show any interest in involvement in our local community. We had different lives than we do now at that time. And the big turning point for us was when we moved to Garland 10 years ago and we bought our first house. And the big change was that we were ready to set roots. And for the first time, our community would be our community for the foreseeable future. And I don't think that buying a house changed Dylan so much as it activated a side of him that I just didn't know existed before that point. And he became this man on a mission to make everything around us better, is the best way I can describe it. Some of that was home improvement. We were big contributors to the economy our first year working on our house, but it extended more broadly to the community around us. And I got my first taste of that just a few days after we moved in. A neighbor named Tom came over with a welcome package from the neighborhood association, and he introduced himself. And I went off to unpack a box thinking nothing crazy was going to happen, but over a 30-minute conversation between Dylan and Tom, Dylan agreed to not only join the neighborhood association board, but also to completely take over writing the newsletter. We hadn't even unpacked all of our boxes yet. And I looked at him, I said, well, this is a little bit crazy, but he didn't even pay attention to that. He was too busy looking at the newsletters online and telling me all the changes he wanted to make to the layout. And so we got to know a lot of people through his work in the neighborhood association. He eventually became the president. And I think his real focus with his work in the neighborhood association was on bringing more events so that people could get to know each other better. So a few examples of that: he created a bicycle parade on the 4th of July with an ice cream contest. We had a 5K run. So things like that where we could all connect with each other. Shortly after that, he told me that he'd like to apply for the planning commission. And the reason was he's an engineer. He goes in front of planning commissions all the time, and he wanted to see the other side of it. So I didn't think much of it. I was naive. I didn't think anything would come from it other than planning commission. Scott LeMay, who was on council, appointed him, and he started doing that. But then the craziest thing happened. So this is back when our kids were little. They didn't play soccer yet, no activities. We could get them down, do the dishes, and watch a show together. Good old days. He started getting more interested in watching the council meetings online than Netflix. And I told him, I've never understood you less. What are you doing? But I did discover that if I watched the council meetings with him, it was a wonderful way to put myself to sleep for the night. So that was our new activity. So it wasn't a surprise after he started watching those meetings when he said, I want to be part of the discussion. I want to join council. And what came with that discussion was him saying that he also wanted to prepare for running for city council by doing the Citizens Police Academy and also by being on the Bond Study Commission, in addition to the Planning Commission. And he was going to do all this at the same time. And we've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So this was the first time that we sat down and had a real conversation about what his ambitions are. What are we doing here? Because he understood that this wasn't just a decision for himself and how he wanted to spend his time. It was going to take a lot of sacrifice on my end to have to basically single parent in the evening while he's at all of these meetings. And so we had a conversation about it. And I remember asking him why he wanted to be on city council, like what were his real motivators for doing this. And he said that this is our city, this is where our kids are going to grow up, this is their future, and I want to contribute to the decisions that are being made regarding the city. And it was difficult to argue with that. You know, with him being an engineer, he has his MBA. It's hard to think of someone that I would rather have as part of those conversations than Dylan. And so I agreed to it, and I think that really put us on the path. He did city council for 6 years, and now hopefully he'll be mayor starting next year as well. And looking back, I don't regret that decision at all. It was absolutely right for him and for our family. Dylan takes a lot of pride in his work, and he loves sharing it with his family. As an engineer, what that means is he puts us in the car and he drives us to a CVS, and he says, look at this parking lot. Isn't it amazing? I designed it. And he's so excited. And I have to reach down really deep and say, I love that parking spot over there. And I love the slants of the concrete. I can just see the water draining. I mean, you got to really reach. When it comes to city council and him sharing the work that he's done there, that is a lot more fun for me, for the kids. So one example of that is a big initiative with the bond that he was such a big part of was all the parks. The city built a lot of new parks, splash pads, that sort of thing. And every time a new park opened, he took the kids to the park and they explored it, and he'd take out his phone and they'd make a little documentary about what they like about the park, which one was their favorite, and they really enjoyed that. He also takes the kids to a lot of events. They've experienced all sorts of things that they wouldn't have otherwise experienced with him being on council. Many of you have met my children at all of these events. And there's a little slideshow that we put together over here showing our involvement with the city. And there are a lot of pictures of our kids up there. It was kind of fun putting it together. But that's because they've been such an integral part of what he's done on city council. Now, one thing when I made that slideshow, I had a lot of trouble is finding pictures of Dylan. He goes to all these events, tons of events, sometimes with us, sometimes by himself, but he doesn't take a picture of himself. I guess he's not thinking that someday he'll run for mayor and we'll need all these pictures. His focus is more on experiencing the event, talking to people. For him, it's not about taking a selfie and posting it on Facebook so he can use it for some sort of benefit. And I think that's really important. You know, there's a stereotype a lot of us have of politicians, that there's a little bit of narcissism at root in the motivation. It's about attention, about feeling important, and that's just not what drives my husband. So what does drive him, the things that he comes home and talks about, is his interactions with people, primarily. There's a lot of phone calls he takes. That's a big part of his job as council person, and nothing makes him more satisfied than when someone calls him with a problem that he can solve immediately, which happens more than you think. You know, there's a pipe that bursts, they need the city to come out, they can't get a hold of the city, so he makes the phone call to the right person and they're out there within the hour. Things like that happen a lot, and all he is the facilitator. All he has to do is make a call. It's really a testament to the city and what a wonderful job the workers of the city do, but he loves being a part of the solution. Some phone calls he comes home and tells me about are of a different sort, where there's a problem that he can't solve so quickly. And he'll be on the phone with people 45 minutes, an hour during work. This is quite common. And at first I told him, this is not reasonable. You should tell them after 15 minutes that you have other things to do with your life and make an excuse and hang up. And he said, no, sometimes people just need to be heard. They need to know the city is listening, and that's how I can help them. And so it is very common for him to talk to people for an hour, however long they need him to listen, even during work hours. That's part of the job that he feels yes, Keita is one of them. That's one thing that he finds very satisfying about his job. Let's see. In closing, I want to say a few things about who he is as a person that I think it's important for me to put out there for people to know about Dylan. So he's very committed to council. His whole 6 years on council, he's only missed one meeting, and it's when our son was born. So pretty good excuse. He's very committed to his work. He's an excellent engineer. I'm very proud of how successful he's been there. But if someone were to ask me what his priorities are, based on what he talks about, his actions, that sort of thing, I wouldn't say the council and I wouldn't say his work. The first thing I would say is his faith. He's a Catholic, and there is nothing that's going to keep him away from Mass on the weekend. He can count on one hand the number of times he's missed Mass on a weekend. He's involved in Knights of Columbus, and he's an usher. So all of that is real core to who he is as a person. And then the second thing would be his family, his love and dedication to us. And what I want you to know is that his work on council has taken time away from his family, but it hasn't at all taken away from the love and dedication that he shows to us. And I want to give you two examples of that. So one, he's at city council meetings Monday and Tuesday, first and third week of each month. So 4 meetings a month. And he goes straight from work to council. They feed him dinner, so we just don't see him. And he knows that I'm taking kids to soccer. I don't get home till late. I don't have time to make dinner either. And so on the weekends, when it's a council week, he goes to the store and he makes us a home-cooked meal. And then he tells me, here's what I made for you. Here's a lasagna. Here's the garlic bread, broccoli, whatever. And this should feed you guys for the next 2 days. Even though he's not going to eat any of it. It's just for us because he wants to provide for us while he's gone. And he's done that consistently for 6 years. And I don't know that I thank you enough, but I truly appreciate that. The other thing he does, it's a long day when he has these meetings straight from work to council, and he usually gets home right when I'm wrapping up bedtime pretty often. If it were me, I'd be looking for the couch in my PJs to finally have some relaxed time. But he doesn't even change clothes. He comes straight upstairs in his suit and asks us how our day was, reads a book to the kids, and he has plenty of energy left over to hear us talk about our day. And I don't think that that's always an easy thing, but he's really happy to see us. So I think council doesn't take away from his love of his family. I think it's one way in which he expresses that love in the way that he takes care of us is how I look at it. And it makes it really easy for me to support him. So all of those are why I will be voting for Dylan on May the 3rd.